It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, you see the fire flickering over my shoulder. I'm wearing a red sweater. It's time for Friday's Fireside Chat. Today, I want to talk about Konica Minolta retiring the Muratec brand. And quite honestly, I don't know anybody to be surprised by that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they could have retired that brand the day after they bought it. But I went back to 2017, and I'm trying to figure out in my mind, why the hell they even buy this company? Ladies and gentlemen, if our industry would actually ask questions, a lot more questions, we'd be prepared for a whole lot more things that are going to happen. But our industry just doesn't ask any question whatsoever. As far as our analysts or our editors that manage these blogs do, they go to Konica, but if it's about Konica, you just go to Konica Minolta's website, they'll do a press release. These folks will copy that information and paste it in their own blog like it's news. But usually the press releases are just the beginning of the story. And the problem is our industry, no matter who the OEM is, whether it's Konica, Ricoh, it doesn't matter who the OEM is. The OEM will issue some press release. The industry's analyst and media will copy that and paste it like it's news. And that's the end of it. And quite honestly, I think going forward, we got to start asking some more questions. Why are we afraid to ask these questions? It's just mind-boggling to me. People will look at me when I ask them questions and they'll say, Ray, you're so negative. Folks, I'm talking about realities, and if those realities are negative, so be it. And unfortunately, in a declining marketplace that's ripe for disruption, a lot of the realities are in fact negative to the status quo. That is for sure. I'm not going to deny that. So a lot of what I talk about might come across as being negative. But holy crap, if we can't face realities, how in the hell are we ever going to move forward? So I want to ask Konica a question here, and the bottom line is simple. What happens to the Muratec dealers? What happens to that distribution? And folks, here's the reality. If I'm Konica Minolta, a lot of you are getting canceled. I'm not saying that to be mean, and Konica's not saying it to be mean either. It's just reality. If there's a Konica dealer in a marketplace, and there's a direct Konica office in a marketplace, do you think that dealer really wants a Muratec dealer to now become a Konica dealer? And if that Konica dealer has any substance at all, they're calling Konica up and saying, do not let them sell Konica in this market. And Konica's probably going to agree. They're going to look at the math. And it's not just about Konica. This is going to happen with all the OEMs. I did a video not too long ago, and I talked about private equity, looking at the conglomerates over in Japan. What's going to happen when they start coming together? And let's say Toshiba and Ricoh come together as a great example. What happens? Do they call up the Toshiba dealers and say, well, you know what, we appreciate it, but your services are no longer needed because we have 2 Ricoh dealers in the community. We don't need you. Folks, if we're not prepared for this stuff, we're going to get blindsided because it's coming. I think about Konica Minolta and their all-covered product. The all-covered product is the IT services company, and I've been pretty vocal about that because Konica doesn't really break out the numbers of all-covered. But they're out there in the marketplace trying to get dealers to use all-covered as the back end for their IT business. There is no way in the world that I would ever do that or recommend anybody do that unless Konica Minolta would share the numbers of all covered. And I stopped for a second because I want you all to think about that. Konica Minolta, again, it could be any brand out there. Just retired Muratec. We all probably knew that was coming. Not a big deal. But what if they want to retire all covered? I did that video yesterday on CompuCon and Office Depot. What a train wreck that was. Could you imagine if Office Depot allowed dealers to sell IT services through CompuCon? How disastrous that would be right now. I'm not saying that all covered's anywhere near in the shape that CompuCon was. But the bottom line is nobody knows it because they don't share the numbers. Maybe if you're a dealer and you're going to engage with all covered shares all those numbers with you. Maybe you have an NDA and they share them. That's all fine and dandy. But Konica Minolta is a publicly traded company, and at the end of the day, I think the numbers should be public, and they're not. Folks, as you go through the next couple of years, who you partner with is going to be extremely important, and none of them are safe. So it's not like one OEM is better than the other OEM. That's not what this is about. There could be struggles at every OEM, and how those OEMs align themselves with bringing the future to the present is going to be critical to your deliverable. Because if the OEM is just going to focus on print equipment, the OEM's probably going to get gobbled up or be the gobbler-upper of another OEM, because we all know there's too many people making print equipment. If the OEM's offering other services, then you better understand what those other services are and what's the sustainability of the OEM delivering those other services. Or if the OEM wants to spin those other services off, not a big deal, as long as those other services could survive on their own. This is the reality in our space today, because we can't talk about any of this stuff. We just hope that everything works out. Ladies and gentlemen, our obsession to be happy all the time, and we go on webinars and we talk about how at the end of the webinar everybody be smiling. That's why I don't do webinars, because by the time it was all over, you'd all be crying so bad it'd be terrible. But that's okay, because most of the time you'd wipe off the tears and you'll move on and maybe you'll learn something. I'm convinced that if our industry could tickle each other through Zoom, that's exactly what they would do. Oh, that person's getting upset. Stick your hand through the screen and tickle them. I say that with some sarcasm, but our industry's got to get past this insanity. You know, we don't want to talk about anything that has any kind of distress involved with it, and so we're unprepared. And when Konica Minolta retired Muratec, I think everybody should wake up to the fact that one day you might get a phone call, are you ready? Who are your partners? What conversations are you having with your OEMs? What are your OEMs hiding from you? What are they upfront about? Folks, we need real partners. And real partners don't hide things. I realize that OEMs and publicly traded companies and all, even dealers themselves, there's a lot of things that you want to protect in confidentiality. We all get it. But we're talking about survival. And unfortunately, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of people that realize where we're at as an industry. We're at a point where we have to change and reposition ourselves to thrive. We can all thrive, no doubt about it. But we have to reposition, we have to transition. And that in itself is painful. That in itself is costly. And so we don't need to just assume that whatever an OEM decides to publish, that our analysts and our industry blog editors decide to copy and paste in their blogs is the story. We need to ask more. What's the rest of the story? Because if we don't know what the rest of the story is, we're sure as hell going to get surprised when the OEM gives you the phone call. Some things to think about, my friends. Have a great weekend, because we all know this: status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo. I'll see you all on Monday.